So let's talk about some secrets. We're going to start with a few from Elden Ring, but then we're going to dive back into secrets from Software's other games, which I'm very excited about. It's been too long. Number 1. Did you know that the Heirloom set of talismans appear to be based on a real-life historical artifact? So this is the Hockley pendant. It's a diamond-shaped piece of jewelry that depicts a female saint supporting a cross. Specifically, it's a reliquary pendant, which means it has a sliding panel on the back that's designed to hold a small relic. This piece of treasure dates back to the 16th century and was discovered by a young boy in the UK in 2010, making headlines on all kinds of places, including Reddit, where the first comment I saw was, "This is the mother flippin' Star Scourge heirloom from Elden Ring." Of course, it's the exact same color and shape as all 4 heirloom talismans, and it goes to show the depth of research that the design team does for their rings and their talismans. But of course, Elden Ring pulls inspiration from previous From Software titles more than anything else, so to some of you, this next secret might bring up some painful memories. Do you remember that purple binding spell that the larger Fingercreepers can cast? Well, its binding animation is actually exactly the same as the one found way back in the original Demon Souls. This attack made the Mind Flayers absolutely terrifying from a gameplay point of view, as they always followed up this attack with a crazy powerful grab attack, just like the Fingercreepers would go on to do 13 years later in Elden Ring. Luckily, this projectile is a lot easier to dodge now. And if you want to learn more about it, go and check out Amir's video on the topic. There's even an unused damage state in that video he talks about, which forces your character to walk in a sickly manner, just like they do when enfeebled in Sekiro. As always, all creators are linked in the description, and I highly recommend that you subscribe to all of them, just so you can enrich the quality of Souls content you consume on YouTube. But speaking of reused assets, here is one that just refuses to die. So originally, a location called God's Grave was planned to appear in Dark Souls 3, but then this map and its assets and even its soundtrack, which I'll play for you here, they all were abandoned. Until later, when the Ringed City DLC was released, and gravestones from this place were finally featured in the game. But then, data miner Lance McDonald pointed out that an asset in Elden Ring still references Godgrave to this day. Here at the end of Castle Morn, a huge tombstone with a hole in the middle continues to be used as an asset. It's not really clear who these graves belong to in Elden Ring, but now part of me is wondering if it's not the grave of a god. Regardless, someone at From Software really likes this design and just won't let it go. Next, remember that cinematic scene way back that was released with Elden Ring's story trailer, where a Cleanrot knight thrusts a spear into Radahn? It's just one of many spears that now remain in his body, and one of many Cleanrot knights that litter this ancient battlefield. But did you know that a living Cleanrot knight still remains here in this arena? Well, at least it does in version 1.0 of Elden Ring. And if you disconnect your internet and disk install Elden Ring, you should be able to find this Cleanrot knight here as well, still alive in the arena. For number 5, do you remember fighting this knight commander here at Castle Height? So, as you may know, this knight features in Kenneth Height's questline, and he is described as a knight commander of Stormvale who is simply obsessed with blood. Fittingly then, he does use a bloody slash attack, which makes him a unique enemy, but did you know that it goes further than that? So recently, I noticed that if blood loss is triggered in the vicinity when you fight him, then the knight will get an attack power boost, as shown by this red glow on his character. So this boost is actually a bonus granted by the Lord of Blood's Exaltation talisman, which is a talisman that we can find in-game on Esgar, a Priest of Blood boss, who is clearly an adherent of Mohg, the Lord of Blood. The talisman's description invites these adherents to render up offerings of blood to their lord, so it follows that this knight isn't just obsessed with blood, he's actually been indoctrinated fully into Mohg's order, and might not be too loyal to Godric and Stormvale anymore as a result. And speaking of blood, The first gameplay trailer for Bloodborne aired all the way back in 2014, and interestingly, this official trailer actually contains a kick animation right here. But as you may know, the ability to kick enemies was obviously cut from the final game. But it does still exist in the game's code, and as discovered by renowned modder Lance McDonald, it can be restored by uncommenting 2 lines of code. And in retrospect, the decision to remove it makes a lot of sense. For one, not enough enemies in this game carry shields. This isn't a medieval setting. And not just that, but Bloodborne has an incredibly frantic pace of combat. It's bad enough doing accidental kicks in Dark Souls, and it would have been even more annoying to kick while frantically mashing buttons in Bloodborne. Also cut from the final version of Bloodborne was a compass, which in early development would appear on the UI when you entered a chalice dungeon, as pointed out by Lance on Twitter. Though it wasn't used in the final game, the code has remained in From Software's engines ever since, until it was finally incorporated in Elden Ring. Zullie the Witch also mentioned that Dark Souls also had a compass at one point, which could be enabled from the debug menu. For number 8, there was also an attack that the Shadow of Yharnam boss was meant to use that was cut, which showed the enemy giving up on their snake attacks and just, getting with the times and pulling out a shotgun instead. Lance uncovered this one as well, but it appears it was left on the cutting room floor quite early in development, given it has no visual effects and doesn't do any damage. So if you don't know, Lance is the one who famously designed a 60 FPS patch for Bloodborne, which can run beautifully if you have the right PS4 or PS4 Pro. A while back, Lance even showcased a 60 FPS version of the game with 4K upscaling on PS5 to the folks over at Digital Foundry, and they made a video on it, and I'd highly recommend you check out that video. Halfway through, they discussed the prospect and the difficulties surrounding an official 60 FPS patch for Bloodborne, and it's an interesting discussion. Basically, they concluded that patching Bloodborne to unlock 60 FPS is a bit of a development nightmare, since remounting the entire game and updating it with new code is not just tricky, but also likely it requires a new contractual agreement between Sony and From Software. My personal theory is that From Software and Sony are hesitating to implement a 60 FPS patch for Bloodborne because they'd rather just sell it as a remaster and make a big deal about it when that time finally comes. They did recently acquire Bluepoint Games, after all, who remade Demon Souls, but that's just a theory. There's so many fake rumors that fly around about Bloodborne getting a remaster or a sequel, so I recommend you really don't believe anything until we get an official source. But in my opinion, it does seem inevitable that something will be done with the Bloodborne IP eventually. I think it's just a matter of time. Bloodborne is so beloved that it even lives on in other PlayStation games. Recently, a poem written about Yharnam can be found in God of War Ragnarok. In the game, you collect a series of books called Kvasir's Poems, and each pays homage to a different PlayStation game. Bloodborne's is titled Sanguinity, and it reads, "Kill and die, wound and sigh, bleed and perish, slash and cry, inject and deflect, think and reflect, fire, expire, murder, infect. The moon grows crimson, the mad townsfolk shout, the city, a prison. Carve your way out." The cover of this book then features the Hunter's Mark, which is another fun Easter egg. But before I go on, I want to quickly talk about this video's sponsor, which is Factor75. Factor offers these great pre-prepared meals that are ready to eat in 2 minutes or less, with a rotating weekly menu of over 27 meal options and 33 add-ons like smoothies and keto shakes and desserts and more. I've been trying to lose a bit of weight myself recently, and honestly it helps so much when you have convenient meals on hand that you know will help you to achieve your daily goals. It adds adds purpose and convenience and predictability to your day. Not to mention it helps you avoid fast food and ordering in, and with these chef-prepared meals, there's little guesswork involved, so you'll never have to opt for something that isn't good for you. So please use the link in the description below or go to go.factor75.com and use code POGVIDEAFEB50 for 50% off your first box. Now, back to the video with number 11. Another interesting secret recently revealed about Bloodborne is that at least one of its songs is written with Latin lyrics. Antonius Tertius on YouTube was able to get in touch with a music producer who worked on the game, and they finally offered a translation of the lyrics for Laurence, the first vicar. So, if we listen really carefully to the opening few lines from this song, we can just make out lyrics that paint a haunting and fitting picture for Laurence. According to Tertius, these Latin lyrics are as I've written them on screen. However, the music producer's original lyrics are slightly different, as they represent a closer interpretation of what the team wanted them to mean. They once read, "If you desire mystery and learn, you shall be rewarded. Attain the holy blood. You shall be rewarded the secret of holy blood. We attain humanity, surpass, and lose it. Attain the holy blood." Make sure to check out the rest of Antonius's video for extra details on the lyrical and the grammatical changes as well, here. Shifting gears here a bit, did you know that you can only kill flying birds in one From Software game? Limit Breakers has an entire video on this if you want to go and watch it before I spoil it, but I'll give you a second to try and guess which game. And it's Demon Souls. While you may be able to stab or shoot them when they're on the ground in Bloodborne and Elden Ring, the only game that lets you shoot birds out of the sky is Demon Souls. It may take you many, many attempts, but the end result will reward you with white arrows. These arrows are really powerful, which makes them a really good choice for taking out larger enemies. But when it comes to the red dragon in Demon Souls, did you know that you can put these arrows aside and just defeat it with a melee build instead? It's true, and it will make picking up the rewards that it guards a lot easier. So, how do you accomplish this? Well, if you stand right here on the bridge, on the Lord's Path in Boletaria Palace, you can actually hit the dragon's tail with a long weapon in hand, such as a greatsword or a halberd, as it flies down and breathes fire on the bridge. It's a bit tedious, and you can even do this with a shorter weapon if you're crazy, but it is a lot more efficient than firing a ton of arrows and wasting them. It will also net you 17k souls in the early game if you're patient enough to do it. This works in the original game and the remake as well. And while the remake was a great success, did you know that there are still very passionate fans of the original Demon Souls that are still maintaining its online systems even after the official systems were taken down? So the original Demon Souls servers were shut down in February of 2018, but it didn't take long for fans to find a solution. The Archstones are a private server that were created as a way to preserve the game's original online experience. It restores online functionality for the PS3 and PC emulators as well, and it even has a colossal community of 35,000 members on Discord. This server was created by a security engineer named Yuvi with the help of a Reddit user named YMGVE, who had begun gathering data needed to recreate the game's servers after they were initially shut down. Yuvi explains in an interview with IGN that one of the great things about Demon Souls was that the network traffic was sent in almost plain text, which made it a lot easier to understand how its elements worked once you'd figured out the encryption. And even with the remake out in the world, Yuvi promises to keep the Archstones running, saying that no matter what happens, my server will stay there, as there will always be an audience for the original experience. So, can we just celebrate that people like this exist in the community? It's such a crazy initiative to take on, so please set this up for yourself and thank these people. To set this up on your console or PC, check out their website in the description below. Moving on to Dark Souls, I think this game, more than any others, had the most interesting marketing campaigns. And thankfully, a lot of them have been enshrined on the Lore Hunters channel, so please go and check out his video. But he compiled some of the most memorable ones from Slashy Souls, which was this free-to-play mobile game created in the lead up to Dark Souls 3's release that endured a very rough reception. And then there were statues that were super memorable, and even the coffin rig. So this last one was kind of unforgettable. It was actually made for a competition here in Australia after the release of Dark Souls, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It was a gaming setup fashioned into a coffin, complete with a monitor, surround sound, and housing for a console as well. In this setup, you truly were prepared to die. And the marketing dramatics don't end there, though. I remember being there for this one at E3, where we saw this statue that depicted this huge fountain of blood from a character thrusting a sword into a corpse. And in retrospect, this was featuring a mechanic that ended up being cut from the game. McDonald uncovered it after the game's release, and it had a whole gameplay function that I guess must have been in the game when they commissioned this statue. Anyway, please go and check out more details in this video by the Lore Hunter, and check out the rest of the content on his channel as well, which now dives into the lore of Elden Ring as well. For number 16, it's insane to me that we're still learning new things about these games to this day. For example, recently, Limit Breakers discovered that the frog rays in Dark Souls, when brought to water pools, actually transition into a glide animation and even have a hidden attack. So when they're in these pools, and only here will they spit at you. And while this attack doesn't have an effect, even when it's restored now, you can tell that they were planning something for these little guys originally. For number 17, I want to talk about something else in Dark Souls, and that's Maneater Mildred. So she invades you near the second bonfire in Blighttown, which is quite a memorable experience and potentially your first invasion up to that point. She has a very fun origin story. So before she was a canon character, she was actually a playtester. So on a Japanese podcast a long time ago, Miyazaki explained that during the debugging stage of Dark Souls' development, a player dressed in Maneater Mildred's weird garb invaded a session, and on impulse the team decided to replicate the invader as an NPC because they just liked the idea, and it must have been a memorable experience for them as well to get invaded in these early days. And to this day, a butcher woman has been featured in most of From Software's subsequent games. Dark Souls 2 features Melinda the Butcher. There's the Mad Woman in Dark Souls 3, and even Anastasia, the Tarnished Eater in Elden Ring. You could sort of also argue that Bloodborne has a Butcher Invader as well, with the younger Madaris twin who dons the Butcher set. So they really left quite an impact on this series, and it's crazy that it was all spawned from one playtester. It's always fun to learn what inspired Miyazaki and the team. I wish we got more interviews where they just talk about the creation process behind these games. One of these inspiration sources for Miyazaki, at least, has been known for quite some time, and that's Magic the Gathering. And many people have noticed that there have been similarities between certain cards and characters that are now within From Software's worlds. So here's another one that I haven't really seen talked about too much. As pointed out to me by Aurelai of Norden on Twitter, a perfect example might lie with Painter's Servant, printed in 2008, which we think might have inspired Slave Knight Gael. The flavor text of the card reads that it gathers hues from the twilight mist so that its master can paint a better world, which has similarities to Gael's soul description, which reads, "The red-hooded, wandering slave knight Gael sought the blood of the dark soul as pigment for the painted world." So much like the painter's servant gathers hues for its master, Gael seeks to gather the pigment from the dark soul to give to the painter so that she can paint a better world, something that will make a good home and will be a cold, dark, and very gentle place. So that one looks pretty familiar to me, but I want to know, have you ever come across a MTG card that looked familiar to a theme or a character or an enemy in one of From Software's games? I'm a big fan of other card games. I've never really played Magic the Gathering, but I am getting more into collecting and learning about it lately, so I'd love to learn more about any other connections you guys know about. To finish off, here's 2 short Sekiro secrets. So, as you might know from my previous secrets video, I was going through all of the Design Works art books recently, and I came across this picture of Owl, where he stands next to his owl, and you can just see the similarities between them. This reminded me of a Zullie the Witch video, where she takes a closer look at the owl in-game as well, and it's just stunning how similar the two are. As it turns out, the owl only has one eye open, similar to Father Owl, except it's on the opposite side. Probably a design detail that you wouldn't catch unless you freeze frame the game and look closely, but it's always crazy to see how much detail the developers go into. But it's not just the developers that can be incredibly creative, it's also crazy how creative some players can be while fighting in this game. And I want to talk about one of Ongbal's videos. I wanted to shout out Ongbal for ages. He makes these crazy fight montages where he fights in like the most efficient way possible, never missing an opportunity to attack or parry perfectly. His videos are fun to watch. So they discovered an interesting way to take out the Sakura Bull in Fountainhead Palace. All it requires is a bit of stealth for this shocking result. So with the help of the Okami leader that throws lightning near the palace entrance, you can actually lure the bull into a trap where then you can attack it with that lightning. Ongbal accomplished this by staying underneath the bull and following it until it was near the shrine's entrance, and then at the very corner he throws fireworks to get it stuck. And then from there, he performs a lightning reversal when the Okami leader throws a bolt their way, and you can deflect this at the bull. And it's a surprisingly effective way to take out this enemy, I guess. But the crazy thing to me was that the bull even had an animation for being electrocuted, considering this is not something that you can normally do. So I found that crazy. I found so many of these secrets entertaining, so as always, thank you for watching. Please go and check out all the creators in the description. Check out Factor 75 if you want to support the channel and get some good meals, and I'll see you in the next one.